today to continue our fall seminar series by welcoming Ahmad Mohibi to speak. Our seminar today sort of continues our trip around the world. We began the semester, of course, in West Africa. We continued over to Indonesia with Julie Chernoff-Wang's talk last time. And now we land squarely in Afghanistan. And it's an enormous privilege to have Ahmad join us today. I sent you around his bio, but just a couple of highlights. He's the founder of a Washington, D.C. based nonprofit organization called Rise to Peace, which is focused on empowering peace, education, and tolerance to prevent terrorism and extremism around the world. Ahmad has a fascinating background. He left school at 15 and worked with the US military and State Department in his native Afghanistan before migrating to the United States later in life. He earned his degrees firstly at George Mason and then at George Washington. And in chatting about his work and the work of Rise to Peace over lunch, it's clear that he's an interesting and important voice in the field. Two other quick points. I was trying to remember when the last time in our series we had a speaker speaking specifically on Afghanistan. I think it's been a couple of years, and that it was David Kilcullen. I might be the only one that remembers that, though. We are, however, continuing, I think, a really good tradition in our seminar series of having speakers from civil society. So within the last couple of semesters, we've had Humaira Khan from the Muflihun organization and Daisy Khan, no relation, from the Women's Islamic Spiritual Initiative here in New York City. So please join me in welcoming Ahmad Mohibi.
Oh, thank you. Setting is fine here? You're
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Sorry, we started a little bit late, just paying tribute to the 9/11 memorial. And but before I start, I just want to say, how old were you and were you when 9/11 happened? Six.
Young people.
Yes. And
Go on, Roger.
The reason I ask you that is that a lot of us are the generation of these past 18 years. And we've been, kids, some babies, and some really aged that did not understand what really happened, that the topic of terrorism really dominates and has changed. I was in Afghanistan, and I was 10, 11 years old at that time. And we didn't have TVs, and we didn't have a better way of today. We have the Facebook and smartphones that you get the news really on an instant message. We heard it through the radio, and then what happened in 9/11 was a tragic incident. Maybe I didn't know about the United States at that time. All I knew was of America as a continent. And that's why we are here today. We're trying to talk about what role each one of us, you, me, civil societies, the government, and the international stakeholders can play in preventing, countering extremism. My name is Ahmad Mohibi, and I'm the founder director for counterterrorism at Rise to Peace. Founded through personal experience, passion, living through the war with great people, with great heart, wanted to make a difference. But before I start and before I go, I really want to thank you, Dr. Peter Benemek, for facilitating this talk. I really understand and really believe that having people to speak on different issues with a little bit expertise, or not have to be a PhD, but at least living through the war, I think it really brings some to the table. It's really good, and that's what we are trying to also do at Rise to Peace. And I will also say thank you for Center on Terrorism for doing a great job on trying to help more people understand about the dynamics and the threat of terrorism. Before I start, I would like to talk a little bit about organization, Rise to Peace, why we are here. And then I'd like to know more, and I'd like to have conversation, questions, so we could better be able to help and go to the topic. I founded Rise to Peace 3 years ago, and the mission is to counter and prevent violent extremism through using the voices of victims, the voices of former extremists or terrorists, as a way to help both policymakers in creating better decisions, and as well as helping local communities in offering what they think is best. One of the biggest things within the organization is we really believe in having the communities to bring the change, not donors, not major organizations. That's what Rise to Peace is about, and a lot of publications, projects, an active project in Afghanistan. A lot of work has been on women empowerment and the peace process, and it goes. And I want to say thank you, the team Rise to Peace, for making this also happen. I have Nick Webb, he's working with us on research on Afghanistan peace process, and has been the past year he has been involved. Please ask him any questions after the seminar. Kristen Hartwig, she works at the World Bank and at the same time with the Rise to Peace organization. She plays a big role in different projects, and she's really interested in youth protection and how international development can play a role. And we're going to shortly, Megan Rahel, she is actually from John Jay Criminal College, and she's a graduate, and so she will be joining us. So please feel free to ask us any questions towards the end of the whole seminar that we have. But the biggest thing, I really thought carefully about what I'm going to talk today, and I want to briefly start a couple of minutes, and then I would like to open it to all of you. And the reason I have the notes is because I talk a lot, and I do not want to talk a lot about the issues, because the topic of terrorism, there's so much you could talk about. There is the radicalization, there's CVE, PVE, PT, there's hundreds of terms you could use it. And there are different groups operating around the world. But we want to talk about how civil society organizations play a role in countering, preventing, and helping the government. And so that is something that we're going to talk about today, and I'd like to have any questions on that and any other issues that you all would like to talk about. I think it's really interesting for us to understand, and this is some of the things to keep in mind towards the questions, some of the challenges and the problems in the field of counterterrorism, mainly with the term CVE, countering violent extremism, that has dominated the whole organization, strategic framework, and project implementation from theory to programming. And some of the programs that some of the challenges I would like to share that you could keep in mind from my experience, our finding, and then we could be able to have a better conversation on those. One of the, in fact, civil societies, organizations, groups, and communities play a big role in reducing conflicts. They play a big role in electing a president by voting. So there's so many. So the role of the people is really strong, and it's designated, and we all understand that. The first problem that we most often see is a lot of the CVE and counterterrorism has been so narrowed down because there are so different types of violent extremism. There's gender-based violence, and there is cultural, there is religious, social, different. But when we talk about extremism, violent extremism, there should be, we have to talk about broader program and broader objects. In this term, I would say stop focusing on Muslims. And it's 9/11 has changed the dynamics, but extremism comes in all different forms, different groups, different societies, from right-wing, left-wing, far-right extremism, to IRA, to FARC of Colombia, to Boko Haram, to Taliban, and the ISIS, and Antifa or KKK and white supremacy. I think that's the first thing. There's a challenge right now because the focus has been mainly the Islamist extremism, while we're forgetting a lot of other issues. Look at in the United States, the mass shootings that's happening. Look at the xenophobic, Islamophobic hate crimes is rising. That's one of the problems that I mostly encounter with. And that leads me to the second is you have to differentiate extremism, but then not discriminate. What that means is you have to forget about the Taliban in Afghanistan, fix the homegrown terrorism. And that is as I would say, as practitioners, as graduate students, as those who are in this field, it's really important to find out what type of extremism are you interested, what field you want to work in, are you passionate or not. And I'll have to be straightforward. Do not blindly follow a company. Do not blindly follow a policy. See what makes the best sense to you. That is one of another challenges right now we see. There are a lot of, that takes me to the third, and that is a lot of wrong counter narratives or in wrong places. What I mean is there's a policy, well, how to deal with ISIS in Syria. And they take the same policy, let's put it with Taliban. Well, it doesn't work. A policy, a counterinsurgency policy that may have worked in the past with the Irish Republican Army is not going to work with KKK in the United States or white supremacy. So a lot of wrong counter narratives in the wrong places. And speaking of that, in 2016, with President Obama, he was leaving the office, he approved a $10 million initiative to support CVE programs in the United States. And that mainly focused on Muslim extremism. And think about this. In the United States, we had about 176 foreign fighters. That's it. Why do you spend $10 million on an issue that it's 176 right now there are convicts or cases here in the United States? There should be so much that you could do with $10 million. Still, the U.S. government is trying to put on that $10 million. And we as a nonprofit organization, we're trying to tell them that, well, you have to have a better counter-narratives. You have to have organizations that could work on different issues. If Rise to Peace is good in Afghanistan, or if we're good with Islamist extremism, we'll support this kind of organizations. If there's another organization really good with white supremacy, we'll support them. So that is another issue, the third one. I think the fourth one is really important because the failure to understand how terrorist groups and violent extremist groups operate. Every organization is different. I'm talking about community and counterterrorism organizations. There's so many research has been done. There's pile research. What drives a terrorist to do an action? What makes an individual get radicalized? There's so much research. You Google it, you'll find so much. But do you see any action? Do you see any programs and projects that have worked and say, wow, that's great. I want to study that. I want to do that. So there's a lot of efforts, a lot of organizations are so stick to this idea of Islamic extremism, counterterrorism, PVE, CVE. And that's the problem. It's why they cannot have a program that has worked. I'm not saying all the organizations are horrible jobs, but someone who has spent time in Afghanistan and have been in the United States, and that's one of the reasons we have created Rise to Peace. Just with really, really small effort, we could make a major impact. And I could give you an example. Why the Taliban are not interested in the peace process. And to do so, we have been interviewing the Taliban fighters, we've been talking to the extremists, some of the main factors, and that's what organizations need to find out. That's another problem. Organizations' ability and capabilities. What do you want to do? What capacity building program are you going to implement that could help you? And that's what I think about. That's the fourth one. And I think the sixth one is it's about information cross-sharing. That's another problem. There's over millions of organizations, nonprofits in the United States. Different organizations. But when it comes to counterterrorism, the big organizations, creative organization, U.S. Institute of Peace, and like Rise to Peace, there are a lot of organizations. Each one wants to do something. Each one wants to defeat extremism. But there's a lack of coordination and lack of access to information. The U.S. Institute of Peace, they have a program called Resolve. They try to bring a lot of different companies, organizations, and practitioners and experts to talk about an issue. So more efforts is needed in that. With a lot of efforts with CV, a lot of funding, I think there's not a lot of work as far as information sharing. And the last thing I want to talk about, and that's the biggest problem, the biggest one, and that's the topic that's going to drive into today's conversation. There's a gap between communities, the government, and the international stakeholders. This past March, I was in Afghanistan. We conducted a research on 12 provinces. And the whole point of the research is, well, if the Taliban are willing to negotiate, well, what the people sitting outside the barbed wires in Kabul city is known for that. People who are living in rural areas does not have access to, for example, we are on Facebook Live. Most of our audience are in different parts of the world, and that's why we have. But you will not be able to see, I am talking to you here about terrorism. So the whole point was what people in local areas do you want from the peace? What do you think is best? And we focus mainly also on women. What is it for a woman who has raised children and some woman who has lost their brave kids? What do you want from the Taliban? So that is it. And we found out there's a big gap. And in Afghanistan, that's a great example. And you could put that in every fragile state or countries that go through a conflict. So there's a lot of bureaucracy and politics. But when you look at the actual, there's a big gap. So that brings us to the whole topic of today, the CSOs, or civil society organizations. So what role do you play and what role do you have in connecting the bridge, building the confidence, building the trust with the governments? So if you build and you make the people to trust you, build you, and through a democratic election or an interim government, in case like, again, I'm going to give an example like Afghanistan and Iraq has been the same way since 2003, you could see a lot of improvements. I could ask me any question at all. Nick has been working, as I said earlier, on Afghan research peace process. Ask him any questions you may have. But the role at civil society, we will talk about that more in advance later. Going back to the experience and the work I have done in Afghanistan, I started really young. I didn't know about, one day I will be in the US sitting here in John Jay College talking to you. I didn't know that one day I will be founding an organization. I just didn't belong in school, and I just said, well, this is not what I want to do, and so I just wanted to get a job. I didn't want to go there fight terrorism. I didn't want to do it. I just didn't know that. I just didn't like it. I think firstly I got paid really good, and the second thing at that age, making really good money and supporting my family. I'm not from really, say, low to medium class family, but I never thought about this. So it's the experience of my life, working, seeing things, really pushed me to be here today. And one thing I've learned is killing terrorists or not solving any problem. Baghdadi is dead. You think ISIS is gone? Mullah Omar, the founder of Taliban, is dead. You think Taliban are going to be, demolished? So the ideology is still there. That one little thing or so many others that drives a person to leave a family, a children, a mom and a dad to go blow himself up is still there. So what needs to be done is that's what you, me, and others needs to do. Research, let's research. Project implementation, let's do it. Programming, not working, let's do it. But we all have a responsibility. I always say this, you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to have a background like me. Oh, he was born, raised in Afghanistan. Oh my God, he's cool. He has a good background. It's not about that. You can't play a role. You are just like me, a human being. I want to do something good. I want to keep New Yorkers safe. I do not want another 9/11 to happen. So we all have a responsibility. So do not think someone with PhD, someone with years of experience, someone with a bad child experience, maybe like me, are not only the front runners. So you have a great job to do. Yesterday there was a video that went viral in Afghanistan. A Polish teacher, she is teaching English for Afghan children in a rural area. The first thing came to my mind, they're gonna kill you, they're gonna kidnap you. So why she left Poland and she's in Afghanistan teaching English for the Afghan children? Well, she taught something, and maybe she has a heart, passion like all of us. So it doesn't take a degree, it doesn't take a bad experience to be a counterterrorism expert. You are expert in your own way, and you're great at it. There are a couple of ways that you could look at counterterrorism, that you could look CVE programs. The approaches are really different. There's top-down and there's bottom-up. So which one you want to do that? So I really believe that in organization, we all believe you should have a combination of both. You make a policy in Washington, D.C., but who implements it? Who gets the impact? It's the people in communities. So you should have, let the people tell you what you to do. Do not do something that you want to do. I think that's the biggest thing I want to say or talk about that with the program CPE. And I was 2, 3, 4 weeks, I was developing the annual meetings. There's a big number of the civil society organizations, they gather there, and from different parts of the world. And I had to talk to a lot of them. And I think a lot of these organizations focus on project implementations and poverty, saving. But again, it's when it comes to a specific programming, you have to really narrow down what you want to do, what organization have the capacity and capabilities, and that's what I will say with the CVE. I could stop, and I'd really like to take questions, or I could go on, but I think I'd like to engage that conversation, any topic as you are interested. I've taken my notes, I have prepared, and I could talk about any issues that you guys want me to talk about, but I want to conclude it this way. The field of terrorism is really big, and it's very complex, complicated. There's no clear definition. There are a lot of different opinions and views. So there is terrorism, extremism, violent extremism. There is different factors into it, radicalization. You want to say, well, de-radicalization, foreign fighters, reintegration, disengagement, rehabilitation. There's so many keywords, glossaries, I'm sure you will understand, that each one we could talk for hours on. But for today's conversation, what role a civil society organization? I understand what a civil society organization is. Literally people in that community, activists doing peace march, protests, oh, we don't like your policies, or those local organizations do a charity. So it's a combination of a lot of different people. So I want to stop here, and please ask me any questions about the organizations, ask me anything about the work we have done, any topic you're interested in, if that's okay. Otherwise, I could talk, and that's one of my skills. I could talk for hours. That's why I have the notes.
Yeah, I have a question. You mentioned, if I understood you well, that there is a big gap between what government and in Kabul and other places expect from peace and what people in the rural area expect from peace. Can you be more specific?
Yes. The reason I said it is so there's on the macro level. On a macro level, if you look at it, if there is a funding approved at the State Department targeting counterterrorism, or funding approved on DHS, we want to target counterterrorism or extremist narratives or programs here in the United States. But if you go actually see the implementation, the results could tell you how much has it impacted in a community. And the reason I say that is, if you look at it, Afghanistan, for example, because that country, I could give you a lot of examples out of it. There is a big gap because the government and the politicians are so involved into the rivalries and the politics and who wants to stay in power, that the voices of the locals, those who really wants to make a difference or those who have, are not heard. So that is, like when we did the research for the role of Afghan women in Afghanistan, we could not see a foreign or domestic program or organization in Afghanistan that are implementing some sort of programs that could help Afghan women. That is why I say, when the interviews we did with 500 people, out of 500 people, I would say 78%, with maybe a couple marginal error, they say that we did not believe in the government, and there's a lot of they call it corrupt politicians. That is what I was referring. So in order to solve that gap, you just have to give the people what they need. Maybe you cannot fit all of them, but at least some programs that could help them. I hope it answered, but I could talk about other issues.
Well,
but
can you be more specific about what the local, I mean, you're saying that the central government is not believed, that they have their own agenda. Fine. What do local people see differently into their goal? I mean, do they want to have a right for women? Do they want to have health, education? I mean, what is so unusual? Because when you say that, you are somehow, you know, like hinting that there are some real difference about what their needs
Yes.
are, and I'm just, if you can elaborate on specifics.
Yes, I mean, look at the United States, 360 million people, 55 million voted. How about the rest of them? Do you think the government is really representing them? Why didn't they vote? I mean, there's a lot of different issues. Look at Afghanistan, 33 million people, 2.5 million registered to vote, 1.5 million voted. So think about that. Let's not talk, let's forget about, the gap, let's forget about what they want the governments to do. Let's talk about what the government hasn't done. The Taliban claim, we have 70% victory over Afghanistan. We control 70% of the land. So you could talk about health, you could talk about education, you could talk about even food. In Faryab province last year in Afghanistan, people didn't have the food to eat, so they killed a horse so they could use the meat of the horse. And in that side of the country, they use horses as a form, for buskashi, which is the national game. So I would say that's what it is. People are really pushed away from the government because basic needs are not prepared to them. The basic needs. There are a couple pictures I wish I could have showed here. In one area in Badakhshan province in Afghanistan, there are children sitting on a school that is, there's no carpet, there's no chair, nothing. They're just sitting, cool, trying to learn something. Or one of the teachers over there built a school for $2,000. So I think there isn't that much you could do. I think the best thing you could do to get the hearts and minds of the people is to just give them the basic needs. I think that's what is missing. And I think here, if we talk about, I always like to compare things. I'm not talking about developing country. That is happening in developing country. And we talk about developed country. Why the incident in Charlotte did happen? Why the guy sit in his car, the Dodge, and just go and kills people? There's something that he didn't get understood, and there's a lot of stuff to it. But we did a research in Charlottesville, and a lot of people said that's a bureaucratic government. So why there's a bureaucracy? So I think that's a lot to do. You cannot please everybody, but at the same time, as a governor, as a leaders, you have to try to give them the basic needs and the human rights what they need. So that's.
Thank you.
Do you find that people in the community are turning to the Taliban for these resources and necessities that maybe the government is not giving to them?
Yes, that's actually an excellent question. I'm glad you mentioned that. So, given 70% being controlled by the Taliban, so that is a question I could talk into more kind of causes of radicalization or not. Or I would say mainly why the people joined Taliban. Well, different reasons, but that one of them is the people in some areas are happy with the Taliban system of governance. So, although the Taliban are not running through Afghanistan with a democratic or election or legitimate, but they have a self-declared government. Because 1996, they took over, 3 countries recognized them, they had a government for 5 years. 2001, they were toppled. So they have provincial governors, they have district commanders. In a lot of districts in Afghanistan villages, people go to Taliban for trials. And it's because they have a very strict Sharia law, and it says okay, so you have stole something, you're not paying taxes, you're not paying zakat, this is your punishment based on Islam. So people do really rely on Taliban, but I'm not saying a lot of them, those who are in controlled areas. And a couple of reasons why they're doing that. First, the government are not in a position to give what the people want. And that is an example of a failed state. When you're in a failed state, your people lose to tend to lose interest from you, and it stays away from the people, and that creates the gap. So you cannot give them the protection they needed. And that's another reason why a lot of children and a lot of people join groups like ISIS and the Taliban or Boko Haram, different places. For justice, they turn to Taliban, yes. For protection, they turn to Taliban, yes. And in some cases, and that's actually one of the biggest causes, is economic and socio-economic reasonings. So the donors who give money to Taliban, and Taliban makes a lot of money from narcotics and drug trafficking. And also, we have an article coming out this Monday. I encourage you guys to read it. It's about Taliban, how much Taliban makes from the border of Afghanistan, Tajikistan on heroin and opium. So that is another one, socioeconomic. Given a country, giving the World Bank data, half of the population lives below the poverty line, but if you go actual and realistically, it's more than 70, I would say, to 75. So people do rely on terrorist and insurgency groups for different reasons.
Thank you very much for your talk. My question related to the peace talks. It seems to me that there are several layers or multiple tracks of peace talks on the way, including U.S. Taliban, intra-Afghan, and also some initiatives from countries in the region, including Russia, Doha, and the upcoming one in China.
Yes.
So,
actually, they're talking right now. As I'm here in New York, there's a peace talk happening in Beijing.
already?
Yes.
Oh,
I mean,
actually-
they're gonna start it for a couple of days, but it's happening there.
Okay. I have not noticed that it's already happening.
Oh, it's Afghanistan, things happen like this.
Yeah. So, what do you see how do you see that the peace talks can sequence themselves to an ultimate success? And also, what do you see the civil society's role in such peace talks?
Oh, it's a huge. So I was saying over the lunch, June 2018 was the date that gives a hope to the U.S., a hope to the Afghan, and an opportunity for the U.S. to start the peace negotiation with the Taliban. I was in Kabul, Afghanistan, and then a picture was showing the Taliban taking selfies with the Kabul residents and Afghan women cherishing them like children, and the Taliban looking for ice cream because they missed the Kabul ice cream. That was the beginning of the whole peace, hopes for peace and negotiation. And until it was called off by President Trump this past September, so 9 rounds of talks took place, 9 rounds. From Doha, Indonesia, Pakistan, Kabul, China, and different places. There are a lot of factors. I could break it down. What roles civil society, CSOs, and the communities have played, and their voices have heard or not, and the elements of success. I would say, let's talk about the elements of success. If you talk about one success is just U.S. and the Taliban says, well, let's do negotiation. Because I'm going to talk about later, the war mission philosophy didn't work for the past 18 years. Well, it says, well, we killed a lot of them, it didn't work, so what should we do? Let's negotiate with them. That's one success, moving from a military counterinsurgency operations to negotiation. But then 9 rounds of talks that took place, there are a lot of challenges and problems, and that's why President Trump called it off, and a lot of Afghans admired that decision. Tulu News had a poll, over 40 people voted it, and 85% said that he did the right decision. So you do not see a lot of success in other ways because what is it that Taliban wants? What is it that the Americans, the U.S. government wants? What is it the Afghans want? And what is it that the regional foreign actors in the region want? So the Afghan peace process is not as easy as a lot of people might think. It's a very complex peace process. Afghanistan historically has 3 more peace talks that has failed. One with the Soviet Union, and then one with the Afghan Mujahideen rebels that they wanted to have a peace with themselves. And the last one was with the communist regime and the Afghan Mujahideen. So 3 different peace that they had in the past that didn't work. I think that has to do something historically, why Afghans do not get along, lack of compromise. But when you talk about an insurgency group, Taliban, their intentions are really different. I have always thought, and I really believe in that, they are after an Islamic Emirate. They want an Islamic Emirate just like the ISIS Caliphate. And then now you have to define what is it they want in Islamic Emirate. Are they willing to let the woman sit at a table, talk with men? Or are they willing to have the woman to go to office? There's a lot of social and basic rights that has been a lot of problems into that. All the Taliban are willing to accept the Afghan constitution is a compromise of Islamic laws and also Germanic penal code. So the Taliban are willing to accept that law, or they're willing to go to a Sharia law. The other issues that have not been successful is the troops withdrawal. So the Afghans doesn't want U.S. troops to withdraw, and that's something that Afghans really want the U.S. international community to stay. Because this past 18 years have brought a lot of achievements. There's more women in Afghan parliament than we have more women in U.S. Congress. So think about that. So success, not that much. Because 9 rounds of talks, the same thing happened. In Doha, the Taliban promised to not target schools, not target populated areas, but they did. That 1 week of September that run into President Trump's calling off peace talks, over 700 Afghans died from Taliban's non-stop violent actions. So that is it. So what is it the Taliban wants? What is it the Afghan wants? What is it the American government wants? And what's the international community? That is it. When you're talking about CSOs and the role that they have played and they're still playing, it's really astonishing. So there's a big movement. There's a peace march that started from Helmand all the way to Kabul. Little children and adults. That was a big movement. It says we want peace. I think the voices of those people really heard. A woman. There's a lot of seminars. We did a couple of them in Afghanistan, workshops. So they play a big role. There's no way Afghanistan will go back to 1990s or 80s that a safe ground for terrorism. So with the role of international community, with the U.S. mandate to combat terrorism and spread democracy, there's no way for the Taliban to achieve that Islamic Emirate that they want. So there's the role the CSOs play is really important in spreading the message and standing for the Afghan woman and Afghan man and Afghan youth. So I would say, as I mentioned earlier, Afghanistan is a country that you cannot predict what's going to happen in seconds. So that is how that country has been for the past 40 years. You do not understand what's going to happen. There's a regime change that can happen. The first elected president of Afghanistan, Dawood Khan, he and his family were all killed in the presidential palace. Just in one lunchtime, people were just going to lunch. My father remembered that day. He said, we just heard helicopters and just gunshots. That's it. So that's how Afghanistan is. You do not know what's going to happen. So with the peace process, it's just, we could talk more about it, but so we do not understand for sure where it's going.
Obviously, Afghanistan is a high priority. It's one of the longest, lasting conflicts that we have today. But are there any other areas that Rise to Peace is kind of focusing on, or at least picking up on?
Yes.
Or is it mostly focused on that?
So Rise to Peace is, we focus globally. But when it comes to capabilities, what we can do actually on the ground is the United States and Afghanistan for right now. In the U.S., we have a domestic counterterrorism program. We're looking at homegrown terrorism and trying to put a lot of initiatives and trainings and discussions like this and how we could be able to spread our understanding, our finding with other people. So that is how we have been operating. But when we have our big research and publications, on our publication side and research, we focus on Middle East and North Africa. We focus on different parts of the world. We have pieces coming on FARC, Colombia. We have pieces coming on Ireland. We close look at Europe and Central Asia. So those are more educational pieces coming out, not a project. When it comes to project, Afghanistan, United States. Thank you.
just regarding how much of an influence and role do you think ISIS is having in Afghanistan, and is there any coordination with the Taliban, like the way Taliban was with Al-Qaeda?
Oh no, they kill each other, they bomb each other.
Right.
ISIS, that's what President Trump said, let them kill each other. So they're from different, so there comes study of religion here. So in Islam, there are different school of thoughts. Because there's different scholars have interpreted Quran and it says, well, this is how this school works, this is how school. So there's I'm sure we have heard of Wahhabi, so that's, Taliban, ISIS says you're Wahhabi, and then ISIS, Taliban say you're extreme Salafi. So they didn't like each other, and they kill each other, they bomb each other, they did not cooperate with each other. And the role of ISIS in Afghanistan is growing. After ISIS was destroyed militarily, not ideologically, in the Middle East, it went towards Asia, went through Central Asia. So they're making their way. They are in Central Asia. 2 days ago, the ISIS, 15 of them were killed by the Tajikistan police, and they killed 2 American cyclists last year. And so ISIS has a big role in Afghanistan. Their underground military or training or tunnel was bombed with a mother of all bomb. Last year, President Trump approved that. So right now, the ISIS have been in the northern Afghanistan and just targeting rural areas and vulnerable people. And I could definitely talk about some other. I did interview their prisoners, and so there are a lot of other psychological elements that differentiates what Taliban wants, what ISIS wants.
Hi. Can you tell us more about the 5 groups, ethnic groups, such as Hazars, Pashtuns, and their influence to the politics?
Oh, so Afghanistan is a country built on ethnics and tribes. So it's over 14 ethnic groups in Afghanistan. But the 2 big ones that you referred are the Tajiks and the Pashtuns and Hazaras and Uzbeks. That is one of the other problems in Afghanistan. It's one thing you could see a lot in that country is it's the blame game, which I didn't like. It's you blame, well, Pakistan is the problem, it's Americans the problem, the Taliban are the problem. That takes us to ethnicity. Ethnic cleansing, ethnic conflict is one of the biggest causes of the Afghan war. So domestically, they do not get along. Maybe some, but politics, it's a very toxic politics. As long as there is a conflict among the different ethnic groups, there will be a war in Afghanistan, and that's what better Afghans needs to wake up. So the local people are great. They did not have any problem. Before the war, 4 years ago, Afghans lived without any discrimination, without any, different where you're from, what language you speak, you're Shia or Sunni. Those things did not exist. If it exists, maybe really, really small. But after the war, and with a lot of different, with the proxy war that happened in 1980s and 1990s and today happening, that has been one of the biggest outcome of the civil war in Afghanistan. People are divided. Just the Taliban are divided too. The Taliban are they're not unified, and they didn't like each other. It's for different reasons. So ethnicity is a problem in Afghanistan. It's a big one, and I call it a disease, and that disease is killing a lot of people. I wrote an article and published it on the Diplomat magazine. I call it Afghanistan a Game of Thrones, and it's not like the United States. The founding fathers created, George Washington declared war. He was a general. He just said, well, let's now have election. It's not working there. You have the power. You want to stay in power. So I would say that also drives into personal interest. When you prefer your personal interest over national interest, that you could tell there's gap, there's mistrust, there's no confidence, and there's a big, big problem. And then we have the big element, transactional terrorism. So it's an expression in Afghanistan to use it. Hold your staff, do not call your neighbor a thief. So that means unite, all ethnicities, be stronger, have a resilient community, and there will be no ISIS, there will be no Taliban. How easy is that? But it takes generation, it takes education. I'm a big education development person. I really think people will understand the problems if they have knowledge. And last thing that I'm going to stop here on that and this issue is a lot of fighters, terrorists, and the Taliban, they did not understand their taxpayers in here sending, their paychecks through USAID and other development organizations to help refugees, build them schools and clinics and stuff like that. And their mentality have been really, that's another topic we could talk about it. So that goes all back of lack of understanding. So to wrap up on ethnicity, it's a big thing. And again, it goes to Uganda. Hutsis, Tutsis. We're the superiority. We're the big one. We have to rule. A genocide took place. Afghanistan has there's, I would say, a couple of genocides. No one talks about it. And each ethnicity killed different ones, and it's still happening right now. Ethnicity is a big role. And we see that coming in the United States too. White, brown, Muslim, and they talk about, oh, you're Jewish. So we see here not in a higher, I would say, violent level, but we still see it in that level. It's coming. If there's not a check and balances, there's not a law enforcement and enforcement of law, you could see worse. So there's law to keep in the order, and it takes a while for Afghanistan to be in that stage.
Thank you.
If I could ask a couple of questions. Back on the role of civil society organizations in CVE, can you give us some specific examples of what kinds of CSOs or who exactly these CSOs are, the people that you're working with? What specific kinds of work have you engaged in? So some specific activities and so forth. And in your view, how is it that those activities have the desired effect of preventing or suppressing extremism? What's the mechanism that leads to the desired outcome?
Thank you. So, nonprofit, we rely on people, and nonprofits and small organizations and community levels. You always rely on people. You rely on big organizations. We work with different organizations. It's a big one, or it's community level. But in Afghanistan, we work with a lot of associations, with a lot of woman-led, student-led, with Afghan government, and with tribe elders, and so that is like our main focus over there. Here in the United States, we work with different universities. We work with here in the United States, we work with George Washington University, George Mason University, different universities, and we had a lot of high-level discussions and different opportunities as far as, for example, fellowships, internships, and connecting people from here to Afghanistan. I think that has been a really, really educational program that it has worked really well for us. As I mentioned earlier, for example, Nick, they're working on a piece, or Megan, she's sitting right there. They're working on, we're working on the psychology of terrorism, and so they get to connect with people on that side of the world. And so I think that's like one of the success we have seen. Very small, but you see on how it works. So we also work with different, I would say, stronger officials in the government or ex-government in Afghanistan as well, that they have a role to play and to give us the access or the network. Not maybe the money, but access to say, well, I'll take you to the next village, or you're going to interview such and such. Couple of programs I would say that we have spent and have been really helpful. I think that the biggest one has been when we started the capacity building in Afghanistan, and I think that program has been really helpful because we just literally helping how other students could be able to understand the procedure, for example, some technicals, capacity, like research, how you conduct, how you do survey, how you do analysis, how you put your database, and how you produce it to a report, things like that are really, really useful. When we talk about like macro or policy-wise, we have done really good work. We have worked with the State Department, we have done with the USAID, we have done a lot of symposiums, and whenever we have conversation, we talk about or bring experts from research, we combine all of them and in a major report and recommendations, and we send it to US government, send it to Congress, send it to different think tanks. Whether it drives a policy to action, that's not our responsibility. We could force for it, but realistically, we didn't have that much role into it. or when I was at the U.S. Institute of Peace, for example, I met with Congresswoman Susan Davis, and she's been working on Afghan women traveling to Afghanistan every Mother's Day, and just shared what we have with her and talked with her, and just that's what exactly she said. Afghan woman has to be on the negotiation table. Simple as that. So I would say that is some of the areas. As far as services, I would say the internship fellowship that we have at the organization has really, really helped a lot of young folks and those who are would like to get an experience in the area of counterterrorism, and we're linking them with those with experience or experts, or that has been a big. We have over 168 people who has gone through F and with a lot of different jobs and opportunities, work in different fields. That is one of them. And another big thing, the product with the Rise to Peace is the Active Intelligence Database, which has been really helpful. And it's a database from 2017. It's the numbers of terrorist attacks that happen globally. So it's a lot of other products like that has been really helpful.
And the point about how exactly these activities
Oh.
relate to, right?
Yes. So we are half research, half implementer. So before we implement a project, we would like to find out what we want to do. What is it the problem that we want to address? Have there been similar, and this is like something also keep in mind. Whenever you want to be part of a project or you want to work in a capacity or work on a project, always think about, is there a similar project there or not? If it is, why you want to do a duplicate one? If you think it is, then you want to find out, well, why mine is unique? Well, when we did the Afghan woman research, the biggest reason we did was because all these organizations that have research, or most of them, are just in Kabul. I mean, people in Kabul, that 5 million, 6 million, that doesn't represent all over Afghanistan. So we look at that and said, well, okay, let's map out. Let's put together 33 million people with 33 provinces. Every year there's a province adds up. So I lose track. And then, so we gather the research, and then we create the project. That the mentorship capacity building is one of them, one of the projects. And we see how it served the purpose and how it drives to action. We wanted to eradicate youth extremism in that project. We're not putting it, eradicating youth extremism project. We just have it mentorship and capacity building, and it's really working. It goes back, give the people the resources so they cannot fight. That's the whole purpose of it. Oh.
Yes. One more question about the sanction regime vis-a-vis Taliban. How do you see the effectiveness of the sanction regime? And how do you see the involvement of this sanction regime as peace talks continue, including in considering about the Taliban's participation in the country's political process?
Okay, you said sanctions?
Yeah.
What sanctions from?
For example, travel ban for some Taliban leaders.
Oh, yeah. So I thought you meant like the travel ban for the 7 Middle East countries. There are a lot of sanctions that could have put on Taliban and has not been. That was just temporarily for a couple of days, and it was not a big thing on the media as well, that, the Taliban are not allowed to travel outside. The Taliban freely travel outside. They go to Pakistan, they go to different places. Now they're in Beijing.
So it's not over the such kind of sanctions?
No. The leadership did travel. I mean, in the past, before 2006, that years, before the negotiations, a lot of their leadership, they had an office in Doha, Qatar, that it was created. The former president of Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai, he started the first call to peace. It was 2006, a religious gathering. He called, says, "My brothers, join," and he always referred to them brothers, make peace with us. And since that, the policy of his policy was to not target them, not kill them. Let's try to negotiate with them. He lost his brother in that fight, but still, the Taliban haven't offered or decided to change their mind from killing, targeting innocent people to negotiation. So there's a lot of ways that keeps the Taliban are fighting that the U.S. government and the international communities could be able to work on. Cut their finances. There's an expression goes, "Do not kill the poor, take the food away." So cut their finances, stop the borders, and you will see a decrease in numbers of fightings. Maybe not a short impact. You will not see the Taliban gone by tomorrow. That's a longer impact. So that could be a long-term sanction if you could put on them, and just blocking their finance routes.
But I think the question, you're referring to the UN sanctions,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
You're from the UN?
Yes.
Right.
Oh,
Nice to see you again. Just to clarify, so actually we did have in the spring, somebody correct me, Edmund Fitton Brown from the United Nations, who directs the sanctions monitoring team, which oversees the implementation of the United Nations Security Council sanctions on Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, ISIL, and a range of others.
Absolutely.
I can't remember the precise language. He made the point very effectively he spoke after the release of one of their recent reports, and a consistent theme in his reports is trying to measure the effectiveness of the sanctions, especially with regard to the Taliban. It's clear that exceptions are made for the purpose of negotiation, and so on. But so just to phrase the question.
Oh, now I get that. I thought you meant in Afghanistan, it's those sanctions. UN. I'm not saying it doesn't work. It works, it has an impact. But Afghanistan is an open border. It's kind of like open pot. So it doesn't work on Taliban. The reason it doesn't work is that they have donors that the money pours into Afghanistan from different areas, mountains, cars. So they have a strong finance system. You could, I do not even remember a sanction has worked on the Taliban at the past 18 years. That their leaders, they have lived in Pakistan, and they had an office in Doha. Now they're traveling. I do not see any sanction there. So they are going everywhere. But if you're talking about how sanctions could make an impact, so the Taliban, you could put strong sanctions on them, but their way of resources are from illicit resources, the way of their financing. They do drugs, narcotics. In the article that we're gonna have, the research we've done, they make money from export of illegal drugs and alcohol and wine and stuff. So it's with a group like Taliban, it doesn't work because you're not operating as a normal or say political organization. You're an insurgency group. You do not know who they are during the day, but during the night they attack your base and kill you. So what kind of sanction you could put on an insurgency that the border is on them, mountains are on them, and they could, they're a guerrilla warfare. We're in a guerrilla warfare. So that it doesn't work on them.
How about their arms supply? Because part of the sanctions is
the arms supply.
embargo, right?
So the arms, when the Afghan soldiers, they arrest the Taliban, they find different weaponry from them. They find machine guns. They have made Chinese-made, a lot of Chinese-made AK-47s. They have find American M16s. It's not that Americans are giving them. It's just because the 45,000 Afghan soldiers were killed in the last 4 years, and that's what President Ashraf Ghani said it with the CNN anchor. So think about that's 45,000 was killed. If you put at least 10,000 of them, their weapons are them. So I also want you to watch. There was a movie called the War Dogs. It talks about how U.S. contractors give weapons to Afghanistan. So they buy from the Baltic and Eastern Europe countries. So the way things works in Afghanistan realistically is it's a black market. There are armed militias, there are militant groups, there are thugs. They have weapons. Afghan government do not understand where they get them. You can find factories, but there are reports from intelligence community, and they have evidence that it comes from Pakistan. So you can sanction them, but there are states that give them the money and give them the weapons. So I would say it's a country. It has borders, but it's open border, no border, so that anything comes there. So they have a lot of machine guns. They have good weapons system. And I wish if you could YouTube Afghan soldiers complaining or something like that, you will see Afghan soldiers that says, well, where did the Taliban get all these great weapons that they shoot at us? It doesn't get stuck. Why we get these AK-47s or M16 and we shoot them after 30 bullets, it gets stuck. You know, there's on the news and every Afghan knows that, and I'm sure you guys, if you could research, you'll find it out. So that, I don't know, where they get the weapons, and it comes from outside. If the UN has a sanction, why it's not working? You put a sanction on them and why they're killing left and right. So that is a question I think we should ask UN, why your sanctions are not working. Why you want to sanction an insurgency group? Why didn't you want to sanction a state and sponsor of terrorism? I mean, UN needs to do their job. So apparently, statistics shows the Taliban are really strong.
I'm not inside of the UN sanctions, but I think the implementation of the sanctions really relied on the states.
Yeah, but that is, I mean, for someone, I was there a couple months ago, and I look at it, the statistics of the Afghan soldiers dying on the field. Those sanctions are not working. I mean, the United States cut funding to the Pakistan government, $300 million over Pakistan harboring terrorism. Well, with President Trump, we saw some results, and Imran Khan, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, said, well, I will fix that. And so what I'm saying is, if UN want a sanction, there should be a force on the implementation side. Well, there's sanction, let's implement it. That is the problem a lot of organizations have with CVE, counterterrorism. You have the great idea, you have the program that you create. We're gonna have this program implemented in Iraq and Baghdad. The programming is the biggest problem. You could interview, ask programmers and specialists and tell them how you do it, how successful it is. Do you do the measure or not? So it goes, implementation is the key. If you do not have the ability, capability, why you want to create one? If at Rise to Peace, we just say we want to create a program that could be able to destroy ISIS or Taliban in one village. Well, first of all, we have to be realistic. Can we do that? Well, no. Well, what's the long alternative? Well, try to work with people. Try to work with the government. So I think we have to be realistic at the end of the day. We have to look at ourselves and look at our capabilities before trying to implement, create something.
Yeah, can you elaborate on drug financing and weapon purchase, as if the actual trade take place with Central Asia country or Pakistan or potentially Iran? I mean, what are the trade routes?
Yes. So let's talk about a specific Afghanistan. We did a research, we haven't published it yet. That research, it took us about 1 month. Taliban makes 172,000 American dollars daily from the border of Tajikistan and Takhar and Badakhshan provinces. $172,000. That's 10 million Afghans on daily basis. That's a lot of money. We're not talking about the entire group. We're talking about a couple of their groups over there. And this is what our research has shown. How do you make that money? There are drug traffickers that Afghanistan, after Colombia, is the second one in the world. Drug producer. And it has that great product. I haven't tested it, but they were saying it's the great one. And it's everything organic there. The water is good, the land is good, and the price is good. So, and these send it to Central Asia, Europe, and I don't want to talk about a lot of it because we work. If it reached to the U.S., it's millions. So the product is really good. This is how it works. So we did an interview with the governors, and we did with people over there. So your drug traffickers that they get opium and the heroin from the locals, those who cultivate. When I talk about locals, it's not areas that are being controlled by the government. Afghanistan, it's over 75 to 78%, or it's all land and mountains. It's the government doesn't even have control over. So they make it, and there are contested areas. There are people. They're the Taliban. So cultivation is illegal, but they can do it because it has really good money. So then they gave it to the Taliban. I'm giving a specific example in that side in the northern Afghanistan. So these drug traffickers, smugglers, they get the drug from the locals, and they're from their farmers or the people over there, and then they bring it all the way to the border, and they have a deal, and that's our finding. And we have evidence to prove that, and if people do not believe it, that's up to them, but that's how it works over there. They gave it to they gave it to the Taliban, and the Taliban will pass it through their territory that they 100% has a control over, and they pass it to the Tajikistan border. And there's a river, just like Canada, United States. They're responsible for logistics, they're responsible for security, and they take it to the other side. And from the other side, this is the deal. And look at it, give and take. So they said, well, we give you the heroin, you bring us other stuff that we want. Do you know what's coming to Afghanistan? Wine. And do you know what else is coming? It's called tablet K, and it has been killing a lot of Afghan youth. It's a synthetic medicine that they give, and it makes you high, and a lot. So they bring that. So Taliban, that they want Islamic Emirate, that's another thing. They're not religiously driven. They're not religiously motivated. They're not fighting for Islam. They're not fighting for Prophet Muhammad or stuff. That is another problem with these terrorist groups. They are so much into terrorism's mind. And you look at it, it's personal, it's money, it's luxury. So that's how they make 172,000. They bring, and northern Afghanistan gets the wine, get the synthetic drug, and it distributes all over Afghanistan. So that is one way they make the drug. And they make a lot of money from drugs over there. Afghanistan, northern part is a lot with the cultivation of drugs. Then it comes about Helmand and the birthplace of Taliban in Kandahar. That is another place, and they export it towards Pakistan. And they have so much leverage on drugs. That is one of their biggest funding resources. The second one they do is, as you may not know, or may know, Afghanistan has a lot of precious stones mines. So has not been excavated, there's not factories that create them. I mean, the Chinese government, their contracts have the copper, the biggest contract in Afghanistan. Except that, lapis lazuli and all different kind of precious stones in Afghanistan. Just back in 1980s, the Afghan Mujahideen did the same thing. They sold it through Pakistan to foreigners to make money. The Taliban are doing the same thing. So that they have that resources, illicit resources. That's the second one. The third one is these tax people. Based on Sharia law, you have to tax people. The shopkeepers and the people, and whether it's by force, whether it's by choice, you have to pay. So that's how they make money. And the other fourth and the biggest, the donor money that they get is, I think you should search where they get that money. They get so much money. AK-47s, how all those money. So there's 4 or 5 different ways they make money. So the chain routes, I would say Central Asia towards Pakistan, and those are the main routes that it goes. And the other big one is also towards Iran. Iran is a key strategic location. Not only a lot of Afghans go to Iran, to illegally go to Iran to work, but they also take a lot, not all of them maybe, but a lot of them take a lot of opium and heroin. If you look at the statistics, a lot of Iranians and the borders closer are addicts. And the Iranian government, they have a very harsh policy. They capture you with opium or any illegal drug, they will hang you right away. And a lot of Afghans have been hanged. I'm not saying that Afghans are smugglers, but at the same time, yes, there are people who does it. So there is money coming to Afghanistan left and right. Try to find out who gives them and how it works. If the ISIS had the gas and the oil in the Middle East, the Taliban had the resources, the Taliban have the drugs, the Taliban have the mines, and the Taliban have the big donors. So that's how it works, basically. It's just kind of a non-profit organization. You're going to do a lot of great things, just like us. If you didn't have the money, if you didn't have the funding, one day you're going to collapse. It's kind of like your body. You don't eat, you just want to lay down, sleep. The Taliban are so strong because they have so much money.
Any idea who are the donors?
I mean, United States suspended the aid to Pakistan. So if we look at it, Pakistan has harbored terrorism, and Osama bin Laden was killed there, and Pakistan has been a big key player in it. Although the government says we did not support them, but there are videos, you could YouTube them, that their wounded soldiers are being treated on the Pakistani hospitals. American Afghan soldiers attack the Taliban, and when they flee, they pass the border and they get treatment. So if you let them to come to your house, I'm sure you're going to give them food. So I would say it's really hard. And then there are groups on the other side, Iran. Well, let's talk about it. No one wants Americans, United States to be in Afghanistan. How about that? And Chinese did not want U.S. economically, and that's China and its economy. With the BUILT initiative, why, did they see United States as a challenge and an obstacle? So I would say a lot of, there's Afghanistan factors I mentioned earlier. It's a domestic, ethnic, and political rivalries, and there's transactional terrorism, and then there's foreign actors. And so it's kind of Syria. It's a proxy war. So there's benefits. Short, I do not know, but when I look at news, when I look at detainees, when those who I interviewed, they just pinpoint left and right. That's how it works over there.
Can you say something about how the Taliban has changed over time, especially with regard to its or their participation in negotiations? In your written work, you've mentioned some factionalization within the Taliban, and as I recall, you advocated negotiating with some parts of the Taliban but not others. Can you elaborate upon that perspective, perhaps?
Yes. So 2001, when 1996 Taliban emerged from Pakistan, Taliban means students, a group of students came, and I was in Afghanistan, and they said Taliban are coming, so we just didn't know who they are. At that time, we didn't know terrorism. We have never heard the word terrorism. They're just a group of students coming. And then my dad was in the military, so at one point we realized they're just on the door of our house. So we have to leave, went to the north. So Taliban emerged a group of religiously motivated students. But among them, ignorant and those who doesn't know along the way, kind of like a flood in the river that sucks and takes everything out. That's how it emerged. 2001, with the tragic incident of 9/11, United States got involved, the war on terror started, and the dynamic of terrorism changed. And within months, October 7th, United States went to Afghanistan. So the Taliban were gone. B-52s, U.S. Special Forces, Afghan Northern Alliance, they literally destroyed the Taliban. So the Taliban were gone, and they went to Pakistan. And I have, although I'm proudly doing my work, I'm not a political person, but I like to say the facts. And that's a fact. They went to Pakistan, Osama bin Laden went to Pakistan, and the Pakistani government has always said, well, he is in the Tura Bora mountain. Well, no, before the U.S. Special Forces reached Tura Bora, Osama was gone. Zarqawi decided not to go there, went through Iran, and the founder of ISIS. That's another topic about it. So the Taliban have been gone that year. 2001, they're gone. 2002, they were gone. 2003, they were gone. And it was 2004 that they started coming out. And this is why. Because we started a war in Afghanistan, we decided to do another one in Iraq. So we pulled soldiers, says, let's get Iraq. So the military, that is one case I could tell you 100% work really perfectly. So maybe, and that is what politicians and decision makers need to focus on, what they did in 2001, 2002 that worked so perfectly that is not working now that they should do it. So that's like something to think about. So the Taliban came really strong this time. They came with a lot of good guns, they came with a lot of money, they came with a lot of resources. You know what else they came with? They came with huge explosive and trainings. I like to talk about hundreds of Afghan, American coalition forces died in Afghanistan from their explosive. They were trained. So I call that 2.5 years an educational period for them and regroupment of the Taliban. So you see, that is an opportunity lost. I was little there. If I have that knowledge right now, if I'm this age, I would have said that we should keep doing whatever is working. So that was the result. So they came with money, they came with good guns, and they came with knowledge. How to make explosive, how to target US convoys, how to target US soldiers, Afghan soldiers, and how to kill civilians. Over 100,000 Afghans died in the past 18 years. You could search the number. Those are people. You could fill stadiums of football. So when we talk about strength of the Taliban or capabilities, Taliban have the capability to do any types of terrorist attack in Afghanistan. They bomb US bases, they bomb Afghan bases, they bomb congested areas, but they did not have the capability to take over Afghanistan. So they are much stronger. They have so much power that it looks that I'm advocating for them. It's a reality, it's a fact. And the Kabul city is really safe. A lot of people want to say, well, how hard is it to be in Kabul? Well, Kabul is safe unless you're being by organized crimes, but you just do not know when the next suicide bomb is going to take place. And it's a sad thing for Kabul residents. Years ago, 2005, there was a lot of population going shopping and stuff. Right now, you see a decrease in numbers, in traffic of people movement, because they want to avoid downtown. So Taliban has a strong capabilities. They have strong finance, they have strong funding, and they have strong supporters. They destroy really highly armored vehicles. So the types of explosive they use, TNT or whatever, any kind of explosive, are very strong. And that leads everything to peace. And what does it mean with peace negotiations? Think about this. Why they want to negotiate with the Afghan government if they're strong? They control over 70%. They can kill the soldiers. They can target. They can explode a bomb in the Ministry of Defense of Afghanistan. They can do whatever they want. So why do you have to negotiate? That's one of the key reasons the Taliban have always said. We do not want to negotiate with a puppet government. We want to negotiate with who created them, the United States. And that has been always they're talking about. That is one of the key aspects of the barriers to peace, is the motivation of the Taliban. What the Taliban wants is something hard to give. So that is the reality with the peace process. He says, well, Americans, you need to get out of Afghanistan. Let us come. And they say, we do not want to negotiate with the Afghan government until present. To clarify and fact check, Taliban have never had a negotiation with the Afghan government. Right now in Beijing, their negotiation is with the members of civil society that we are talking today, activists, journalists, former president of Afghanistan. You're talking with former ministers, you're talking with political leaders, not with the Afghan government. And at the same time, Afghan government are not willing to speak to them. So that's a lot to do with intentions of why. And that's I give because they don't want to speak with the illegitimate, that's what they call them. So they have the strength and they have the capability.
I read the news report that the presidential palace said they would delegate some members representing them at the Beijing meeting. Is that true?
Taliban rejected it actually. So there's a news that the members from Afghan government are going to meet with him. The Taliban spokesperson said on his Twitter that we're not meeting with any Afghan government.
But the Taliban is in Beijing now.
Taliban are in Beijing with the members of the Afghan society, with the former president and members of the active societies. So they're meeting with them. Here's what the Taliban are want. Here's what they're after. They're after a worldwide reputation. Did they not want you here from New York, tell them how, wow, a terrorist group? They do not want you to call them that. They want to be very strong. They want to be known as a Taliban, kind of like the ISIS, the caliphate, but more in a political way. This is going to go another direction again. This is why we lost it. I'm saying United States, we lost it. Do you know why we lost it? You offered to say, well, let's negotiate with them. What else you could have done? The Taliban said, well, America, the superpower, the strongest government in the world, is going to negotiate with us? Wow, let's go hard on them. Let's kill their soldier. Let's make them that we are higher. Our demands are higher. This is the psychological war or the war that they started it. They increase their operations, they increase their attacks, the terrorist attacks, to make sure when you're sitting at a table that U.S. government listens to them really carefully. Well, with President Trump, it didn't work because he said, well, I'm going to call it off. You kill my soldier while you're talking to my diplomat in Doha. But right now, still, the negotiations are uncertain. We do not understand if the U.S. government is really willing to negotiate or not. There's no decision yet from the White House. The special envoy is there working with Chinese and the Russian government and also Japanese. But the problem is that there is a lack of understanding what's going to happen. Because eventually the US government doesn't want to jeopardize the legitimacy of the Afghan government. That's the big thing. And that's why the Taliban are not interested. So it's very tricky. When I said we lost it, I really mean it because we could have done much better. So that's why when you started talking with them, you literally helped the Afghan government to be delegitimized. You helped them push the corner. Well, the intention of the U.S. government wasn't that. Just trying to broker a deal. Now that's what it is. The U.S. is trying to broker a deal, and it's a fact. It's not saying, oh, well, why the U.S. is talking to Taliban? Well, realistically, it's the U.S. who kicked them out, and it's the U.S. who put the democratic government, and it's the U.S. who would say, I'm going to take my soldiers out or not. So that's how specific we should be. That's it. I like to know from you all too. What do you think? I'm talking here about Afghanistan terrorism, and I really like to engage in what do you think of CSOs? What do you think? What programs have worked or not? These are some of the things we should keep the conversation going.
I was going to go in a slightly different direction, but.
Yeah, but do you see Taliban, for example, Hezbollah becoming they're part of the political, they're part of the parliament, or they're going to be part of the government, and they're going to be integrated into the Afghan government in a sense in the future? Or?
Well, reintegration is the biggest issue. It's a big problem over there. So the Taliban haven't said publicly that, oh, we would like to join the Afghan government. They have never said that, and they continue to say no. Because that is, when I earlier said the intention really matters, what they want to do. So eventually they did not want to be part of the Afghan government. So that is something no one understands what they want. If they have the force and the power, they want to have an Islamic Emirate. That's there's no doubt. The past years that I've been working in this field, I just say they want an Islamic Emirate. But if you look at it, other works and what other people are saying, and earlier, Peter, you mentioned about some elements of the Taliban, or I said you should negotiate. What I forgot to talk about. The reason I mentioned that in my article is there's a division. The group that wants to negotiate with them. And if they want to reintegrate to the Afghan society, well, reintegrate them, help them, give them millions of dollars, programs, projects, welcome them so they could build Afghanistan. And the group that you see that will never be changing, what are you going to do with them? There is the option, join, and what's the National Security Advisor of Afghanistan said, join or get killed. So that was my whole point. If you focus on a big issue, it says, well, let's all of them to come together, maybe it's not going to work. But work maybe with that 50-40% that wants to have peace, wants to not kill Afghan civilians. and the rest can just be combated militarily. And it sucks to say that killing is not the solution, but with the barbarics and ruthless that kill civilians and children and bomb mosques and schools, what else you want to do? Either you could capture them, put them in a jail, and just go through re-brainwashing. So specific to you, no, they do not want that. No one understands what they want. That is the problem. We're all trying to find out.
But we got also with the prisoner exchange with Anas Haqqani and is there some kind of leverage that they're trying to do, like asking to release certain prisoners?
Well, for 2 U.S. professors, American university professors that are detained by the Taliban over a year or so, they want over 80 prisoners. And Anas Haqqani is one of the top commanders of the Taliban. Haqqani Network, one of the ruthless terrorist groups in Afghanistan. So they want 80 people for that, but the prisoners, exchange of prisoners and release of prisoners have been for the past years. The current president has released a lot of them from the background detention facility. But that is not a key driver for the Taliban to reintegrate to society. And if you look at most of these prisoners have got out of prison are fighters right now, or most of them are been dead. And the reason is, as a non-profit that works in counterterrorism, we really believe in reintegration, rehabilitation programs, which is not in Afghanistan. Find a project, find an organization that does it, let me know, and I say, well, I would love to work with them. An organization like USIP and Washington, D.C., you're trying to do the work, or they have office over there, but measure the success, working or not, that is the problem. And it talks about terrorism. You're fighting for some reason. I mean, there are a bunch of reasons. But you put them in a jail cell, 2 guards, guard them all the time. They go to the judges and they give the verdict, well, 3 years. After 3 years, that person is out. So that person has gone through new training, new reintegration, new de-radicalization, new rehabilitation. So what do you expect from them? And there are no jobs. There is no KFC or Burger King and McDonald's in Afghanistan. And after they leave, what are they going to do? I like to be very realistic and specific. There are no jobs. Afghans with degrees doesn't have jobs. Afghans who live there peacefully doesn't have jobs. So when it comes to reintegration, challenge organizations. How do you want to do it? You're going to give them jobs? What kind of jobs? How much money, how much taxpayers' resources are you going to spend? So that's a huge, huge other problem. And they're smart. They're smart. They understand if we come to the government, what we're going to do. So these are a lot of issues with them. 40,000 Taliban fighters. That's the number they gave them, 40,000. And so the 40,000 comes to the Afghan government. What are they going to do? I mean, there's no way that the U.S. government or the Afghan government are going to put them on the security forces. Because once you're a terrorist, it's really hard to trust you. I mean, unless you go through training and unless you go to a village. I mean, it sucks to say, it's really hard. So I would say education is the key, training is the key, rehabilitation is the key, proper integration is the key, and you have to work on all of those. That's pre and after the whole thing. And I could talk a little bit towards the questions, some of the issues. I like to focus on CSOs and kind of some projects, but I love the conversation, I love the questions. Please feel free to ask more, and if not, and towards the end, I would like to just give some of then what needs to be done. I'm not that person that comes here, talk, UN is doing bad, everybody's doing bad. I always have something to offer. I started with problems, correct? And we're doing all these discussions, it's part of analysis. And say, well, this is what is happening with the Taliban. Then what needs to be done? I will never leave a discussion without saying something. So I will do that at the end. Go ahead, Chris.
Yes. Can you just elaborate on, maybe I'm not clear on certain aspects, on certain things you say. You mentioned they want to create an Islamic emirate.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned also, if I understood you well, that they are not really religiously driven. So and that we are not clear what they want. Is it nationalism, basically, that they think their country needs to be again independent? Is it just basically local turf? Is it, I mean, because if they are not religious and they want an emirate, an Islamic emirate, I'm not sure I understand what that means.
Well, that's what Afghans are trying to understand. Why did they not want an Islamic Afghanistan? It's a question. It's just, well, we're Afghan. You know, when I interviewed an Afghan officer for a research project, and he just says, well, I did not understand. They cannot, when they capture the foot soldiers, the Taliban, he just said, for one of them, there's videos too, you can search them. For one of them that he said, that, well, I asked him, tell me the word that makes you Muslim. You know, you bear witness that there's one God, Muhammad is his messenger. That's how it makes you a Muslim. He said that soldiers cannot even say that. So think about it. Is that a Muslim? Is that Islam? So, and then why did they not? They killed a scholar, a religious scholar, 3 weeks ago. He was shot and killed in Kabul. Do you know why they killed him? Because he was telling them, hey, you're wrong. And he was literally telling them, you're wrong. And there's his videos. He had a Facebook page. He has a Twitter page. He was countering their narratives. So he was killed. So why did they not want, they want Islamic Emirate and nationalism or local, or they want to be independent? That is a broad and complex, because there are a couple of things I could say why they did not want. They want to make an Islamic state because it has to do some with religion. Because years ago, the time of Prophet Muhammad, it was just a time Muslims, Islam emerged, spread, just kind of Christianity. The missionaries go all over the world, convert to Christianity, and sadly, in most cases, people got killed. And in every religion, religion has the bad side too. We're not saying it's clean, it's pure. So that is one thing. They think about it. The Islamic emperors, like Aladdin, and a lot of emperors, like so they look at it and what role we can play in spreading Islam. So they want to create an Islamic ummah, Islamic community, just kind of the caliphate. Why do you want to create a caliphate? So their mentality is jacked up. Their mentality is wrong. They think of 1,000 years back. They did not understand that this is 21st century. It's age of TikTok and Snapchat. And it's an age, an Afghan child growing up in a village now sitting in the United States with different Jewish, Christian, Muslims, different religions. So that's what they are lost. So they're a blank here for most of them. So that's like religious point. But more, they're a political driven group. It's more than religion. It's very big on political. And why they were there first. It goes to the interest of the states. And that's national interest drives the foreign policy of different states. So that is what it is. And with the Taliban is in Afghanistan, you want to think about that. Why they're fighting? Why certain governments are fighting them, funding them? Because those governments have a national interest. And that's how their foreign policy is built towards Afghanistan. So I did not understand that why they're fighting too. So religiously, they're saying that. Politically, they did not want the Afghan system. And they feed from the locals. And the reason they feed from the locals is just new opportunities, lack of jobs, and use of force. And sadly, in most cases, a lot of young adults join them or recruited for just not knowing, doesn't have access to information, and you just think Christians in America are horrible people. That's what they think. There's a big propaganda. If you look at a YouTube, look at the Taliban accounts, look at their Facebooks, there's a big propaganda happening. American soldiers disrespect the Afghan woman. American soldiers destroy Quran. Yesterday, they attacked the mosque, and I have pictures of here. They burned Quran, the sacred holy book of Muslims. The Taliban did that. So that tells us that they're not Muslim. Maybe they're Muslim by name. So if you conclude it, maybe they are after a political change with the states behind them that doesn't want United States to be there first and be just a safe haven for terrorism. So that's the reality. So I wish I could have a specific answer to that. But that's a question every Afghan is trying to understand. Why you're fighting? Why you're targeting our schools? Why you shoot the woman on the head? And why you bomb scholars? That's one of the research I really want you all to read. It's coming out about in 2 or 3 months, hopefully. We have interviewed different people on that, trying to answer that question. So why you are doing that? And this is the question Afghans are trying to understand. Give us one example of that makes you Muslim. And you're not representing a single portion of Islam in that sense. Or ISIS, burning a Jordanian pilot alive, beheading people. So it's a lot of techniques that terrorists use. But we're trying to also understand the same thing. Past 18 years, a lot of people died. Good people died. And for a war that no one understands what's happening.
I'm just conscious of the time, and I wanted to get one question in before you
Okay.
do the wrap-up that you promised.
Yep.
Which is to say, sort of having reflected upon your remarks, how optimistic should we be about the prospects of peace in Afghanistan?
The prospects of peace in Afghanistan, you mean how optimistic?
Yes. I deliberately used the word optimistic. I suspect I know how you're going to respond, but I wanted to hear it.
Well, I think there's one thing I can say that for 100% is the hope. It keeps the Afghan people moving forward. That's the hope. And the past 40 years, Afghans have a strong hope that one day they will have peace. So that is the biggest one. They will be struggle every single day, but their base frame is hope and time. When it comes to as far as how optimistic I am with the peace process, I think if I gave an answer, I'm not that optimistic. I'm not optimistic at all, because it's a terrorist group that kills left and right. And past 18 years, their intentions have never changed. I will be optimistic if they did not target schools, if they did not kill children, and if they did not kill scholars, and if they did not blow bombs in the populated areas. It sucks to say, well, go target soldiers, go target all those people you call them enemies. But that is a man to fight, it's combat. Let's see who is going to overcome. But why are you killing innocent civilians? So when I see a decrease on that, I go optimistic. These meetings are symbolic, I would say. You can meet them for 10, 12, 15 more. Right now it's 10 meetings so far. And specifically in Doha, I'm going to refer to Nick, we interviewed one of the peace participants. He's in Beijing right now. He said, well, we met with them, we had lunch with them, and that actually went viral. The Taliban or the Afghan women sitting in the same table talking, and they promised, this is the quote from them, we will not target madrasas, we will not target religious schools, we will not target congested areas. They doubled it, they tripled it after that. So for that reason, I'm not optimistic at all. They're ruthless and they have bad intentions. And when they change that, I would say I'm optimistic. Oh, well, I want to say thank you. It was a great honor for me being here. Thank you for me listening to me talking this long. I'm a talker. For that reason, I have the notes. I just wanted to make sure I stick to the notes. Otherwise, I could go on and on and on. But I want to wrap up this way. It takes you and me to make a difference. As I mentioned in the beginning, it doesn't take an expert. It takes you and your heart. And how to do that is challenge. I'm a big challenger in that. Challenge policies, challenge governments, challenge politicians. As a constituent, challenge your congressman, congresswoman. And see what's not working. That's like the biggest thing I always give you. Maybe you may not have a lot of friends on that, but also think about it jobs and career-wise. But try to understand why certain things are not working, why there's a problem. I think that's the first thing I want to say. And that's what I've been doing. That's what Rise to Peace is doing. Why we have to blindly go and go and go? I think the other aspect I want to say is why certain CVE, counter-violent extremism, or preventative programs has not been successful. It's because the large sum of money has been given to these organizations without any monetary and evaluation milestones. So that's what I am trying to say is that look into programs have worked or not, and we need monetary and evaluation. If you gave me $10,000 and says, well, go make a project, you should check and see how the project, did it meet the purpose, the mission or not. So that is one thing you should do on each program, each project. And how long they should deceive taxpayers and get money and there's no project, there's no outcome. So monitoring, evaluation is the biggest aspect that you should look into it. Because that leads into corruption, that leads into deception of the people. Because one other reason that feeds into terrorism is corruption. I don't want to talk about it, you could find out how, but corruption is as a result of failed projects. Or project, I want to talk about this quickly. Like for example, in Afghanistan, there was a USAID project called USAID Promote. The whole purpose of that program was to empower Afghan women and Afghan girls. A lot of, your Inspector General, New York Times article came out that it's not serving the purpose. A lot of money are going on the luxury business trips, ancillaries. So that's a lack of evaluation, monetary, and control. CSOs need to have fundings. Fundings with a strong assessment and protocols for a pilot program. And if it work in Uganda, for example, or Iraq or Afghanistan, double it. If not, find new partners. Say, increase funding. In Pakistan, for example, that's a great example. In Pakistan, a large sum of money went to CVE. And it's a fact. You know that the CVE, the CSOs organization, they couldn't spend the money because they did not understand how to implement certain projects. Maybe they have a strong local bonds, you have the tribe elders, but they did not have the capabilities and the skills to use that money for proper trainings. So I would say, whether it's Rise to Peace or any other organization, try to fund organizations that have an actual project that has worked or is workable. Fund it for 3 months and avoid a waste of money. Because ambitious goals, and that's been a big thing in CVE and PVE. A lot of organizations have a lot of ambitious goals. All these experts, counterterrorism, focusing on a lot of different organizations and different terrorist groups, I think needs to push back a little bit, sit back and think about logically and realistically. What is it working? And just by studying in a classroom and talking about it or trying to follow policy, I think that is one of the biggest things try to challenge and try to fix. And if you're practitioners, if you're working in an office, try to work on a project that really means to you. Try to work on a project that is really working. And if it's US funding, the funding is not to be wasted. And the other thing I want to say towards the ending is coordination is a big thing. If you're writing for a piece, for a paper, a capstone, or anything you're writing, talk about coordination. Just like the natural disaster that happens between the class organizations in overseas, and all organizations have to help with the landslides or tornadoes or storms, there's a lack of coordination among the CVE and counterterrorism group and societies, civil societies. Why it's important, the reason it's important is you want to, maybe there's a successful story in Afghanistan has worked, that could work in Iraq. Something might have worked in Somalia that you could implement in Afghanistan. It's very important. You'll learn from each other. So that's the importance of coordination. And the other stuff is, you have a strategy, always compare it versus reality. So you create a strategy, you create a concept, look into how it's going to look in the real world. If I give you an example in Afghanistan, think about you create a project, how are you going to implement it in a local village? Do you have contacts? How are you going to do it? Do you have imagine you got registration, done everything in Kabul. How are you going to do it over there? How effective is it going to be? So be realistic versus your strategy. Have a strategy, have a goal, have a plan, but be realistic how it's going to work or not. So talk about that. Talk to your constituents. Talk to people that they have the power, and with your professors, your academics, and tell them like, hey, this is the problem. And the last thing I want to say is types of activities or projects that may have worked or have not worked. For example, when you want to counter violent extremism and that leads to terrorism, what projects you think would be useful to implement? For example, Peace March in Afghanistan, they started it. Is Peace March effective? And if it's effective, fund more of it, mobilize more people. Kind of the social movement and back in the days and with Martin Luther King, and how with his famous speech on Lincoln Memorial, he changed the dynamic of African American living in the United States. If that is successful, maybe look at that, have more people to revolt against terrorism. So see if that kind of programs works or not. Trainings, what types of trainings can work or not? Helping the Afghan youth so they could go to their communities, that's what we're trying to do. When I say I'm going to leave this room with one thing, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to counter terrorism by not mentioning the name, by trying to give knowledge to the Afghan people. When I say Afghan people, that is specific to college students. So they represent different communities. It's kind of in Washington, D.C., you find people from every state. So when they go to their local communities, they can be able to write down, well, what's the problem here? And what needs to be done? And when they bring that to us, then we could tell USAID, we could tell big nonprofits, we could tell the US government, Europe, well, fund us. I think we found a solution here. So I think you should also think about whether those trainings are working or not. One of the biggest things in CVE is communication and dialogues. So that is what we're trying to do. When you communicate and you create dialogues, what does it mean? It means you want to make sure someone in a village sitting there may know something, and he could be able to communicate his problems or his solutions to the government, to the NGOs. So if you could put together all of them, you could see a result. But again, the way how I started it, try to understand what you want to do and what interests you. Field of extremism, terrorism is really, really big. You want to do gender-based, you want to do counter-violent, you want to do all different fields. And try to use your base knowledge to make a decision, because a decision that you make is going to impact someone in some part of the world. So always think about that. One day you're in a position of power, try to be thoughtful of other people, how your decision could impact. I want to say thank you. It was a great honor to be here.
Thank you very much, Ahmad. Thank you all for coming. Just a reminder that our